slow at first, barely noticeable, but relentless, like a glacier inexorably grinding its way down a valley and devouring everything before it. He'd tried to fight it for the longest time, keeping his body moving, exercising as much as possible, minimizing his contact with the ground, even trying to turn the aching grief into anger that he could use to fuel his efforts. For a time he'd occupied himself with ideas of escape, instinctively falling back on his years of training to divert himself from his own dark thoughts. He had spent hours groping and feeling his way around every inch of his 6x8 cell, searching for hidden crevices in the walls or flaws that could yield something useful, fallen objects he might turn into weapons or tools, weaknesses around the hinges or frame of the solid wooden door that barred his only exit. But his captors were nothing if not methodical, sweeping the floor clean of anything that might have been useful, and ensuring the walls yielded up not a single loose brick or sliver of mortar. At last, frustrated by his fruitless efforts, he'd given in to his mounting anger and hammered his fists against the door until his skin split and bled, screamed until his throat was left raw with the effort. It changed nothing. And always the cold was with him, and it was a patient enemy. It had all the time in the world to wear him down, and after 2 days and nights without sleep or food, that was exactly what it was doing. Brian Drake lay curled in a fetal position on the floor of his windowless cell, shivering violently, the sheer and absolute darkness concealing the cuts and bruises that marked his naked body. The chill air around him smelled of damp, mold, and stale urine. He was too weary to stand up. What was the point anyway? Eventually his meager strength would wane, and he'd slump back down again. How long he'd been here he could no longer say. With no windows, there was no way of marking the passage of day and night. In any case, time had begun to lose all meaning as fatigue and malnutrition took their toll. He couldn't sleep. Sleep in conditions like these would bring death by hypothermia. Everything had fallen apart in Pakistan 2 days earlier. He had gambled with the lives of his friends, staking everything on one last chance to take down Marcus Cain, the corrupt deputy director of the CIA. And he had lost. Completely and utterly. His companions were all gone now. Cole Mason, his loyal second-in-command, had been executed right in front of his eyes. Drake had chosen him for death, been made to choose him, hoping it would spare the life of another. He would never forget the look in Mason's eyes just before the gun went off. Kira Frost, the fiery young technical specialist who had stood by him more times than Drake could count, was separated from him, perhaps dead herself. Another little game by his captors to hammer home how completely he had failed. Worse was to come. Samantha McKnight, the woman he'd placed so much faith in, had been working against them all along. She had given away their plans, compromised their operation, crippled the entire scheme before it even began. That betrayal had cut particularly deep, because he trusted her most of all. And as for Anya, the woman who had started it all, she too was gone. Maybe she had somehow managed to escape the disastrous battle, or maybe her enemies had finally caught up with her and ended it. Drake would likely never know. He closed his eyes as a fresh wave of shivering rocked his depleted body, clenching his fists so hard that it hurt. Good. He wanted to feel the pain. Pain was something he could use. The sound of footsteps in the corridor drew his thoughts back to the present. Someone was coming for him. This was the first sign of activity since he'd been brought here, and straight away he felt his heart start to pound fast and hard, adrenaline rushing through his veins as his body reacted to the primordial instinct for fight or flight. He had no means or desire to attempt the latter.